Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Stuff. I'm your host, Maurice A. Davis, and on today's episode, this is going to be part 3 of your Marketing Foundations course. Week over week, we're reviewing the sections of the McGraw-Hill Principles of Marketing college textbook. We're going to talk about it, we're going to break it down, and give you the information you need to be able to take the same content from a college level marketing course and apply it into your life, your business, and build that foundation as a digital marketing professional. If you would like the notes from this show, go to mauriceadavis.com/vault, and you can register to get access to these notes along with several of the resources and previous notes from the other sections as we reviewed. These principles do build on one another. And so if you have not gone through sections 1 and 2, you may want to. And all of them are linked together in a playlist. So you should have access to that and should have no problems finding that information and getting what you need in order to be successful in applying and learning some of these concepts. All right, so let's jump into the content and see what we got today. All right. So we have 6 learning objectives. We need to describe the framework for digital marketing, the 7 critical elements of online marketing, understand the drivers of social media. We also need to go through and understand the various motivations of using mobile applications, recognize and understand the components of digital marketing strategy, and then understand the vital factors of picking an influencer partner. So right away, let's jump into the 4 key elements of the digital marketing framework. It's important that I kind of highlight the definition from the McGraw-Hill book and then share with you my definition of digital marketing and why I think they differ. Okay. So the McGraw-Hill is all online marketing activities, which include all digital assets, channels, and media spanning not just online, but also social media and mobile marketing. Mine is all digital activities you do to get attention of a stranger to convert them. How these are different. When I think about digital marketing, it's anything that I'm doing that can take a person from in real life to a digital space to an intimate interaction. And I say intimate interaction because the interaction at the end to get them to convert does not have to be digital. If I am a baker,
I bake.
And I only sell stuff in store, then my objective is to get them to come into my store. And so the reason why I don't love saying all online marketing activities, because there are aspects of physical things that you can do that I would clump into digital marketing that they're not digital, right? Or they're not online. I'm sorry. And so one example might be using QR codes. That's not online. It's printed. The actual QR code is physical, but I would say it's still a digital activity because of how it comes about. You also have like restaurants that have display boards that may be like TV monitors that they flash advertisements on. Those are not necessarily online, but they are digital. Another example might be like a digital billboard. Again, that might not be online, but it is digital, right? And so our objective is to grab that person's attention wherever they are, push them to our digital online channel, and then move them over to that intimate interaction, which could be one-on-one sale. It could be purchasing our product in store. It could be purchasing our product online. But there is some difference. And I think thinking about all digital activities that you can do opens you up to be much more creative than saying all online marketing activities. Okay, so let's jump into the 4 E's of digital marketing. Number 1, we need to excite the customer with relevant offers. If you're like, what's an offer? Go back and see notes from chapter 1. That will explain offers, or you can also look at Alex Hormozzi's content. He explains his definition of offer. I use a variation of his definition in chapter 1 notes. The second E is educate your customer about your offers. Third is help them experience the offer, whether directly or indirectly. And then third, we need to give them the opportunity to engage with the firm's digital activities. Now, if you've been following along, then you may have noticed that there are some parallels between this content, the 4 E's, and then the stuff that we learned in chapter 2. And so my class and I, we talked about this idea. Sometimes these frameworks they're mental tools for you to think about the steps that need to happen. And this one in particular is very closely related to another marketing process. And we'll get that pulled up here in just a second. Another marketing process called the 8-step customer journey. And I'm going to pull that up so that we can talk about it because I think it is probably one of the most impactful tools that you can use when you start talking about, I want to be a better marketer. And so, if we can truly understand the 8-step customer journey, then we really know the information that we have to provide. So, I'm going to actually use Digital Marketers' customer value journey because they have one of the easier models to understand. We're going to go through that. And this blog, particularly, is from changescapeweb.com. Just want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. And so let's look at this. There's aware, engage, subscribe, convert, excite, send, advocate, promote. Now, you may see other versions of this on the web, and these don't necessarily look the same. And that's fine. The point that we're trying to make is there are steps that a person has to go through, regardless if we're using this model or using this model. There's steps that they have to go through in order to be ready to really buy or engage with your products on a high level. And so I love this model because it's easier to look at and say, where do I fall in the continuum of activities that I need to have happen? If people don't know who I am, then I can't really think about how do I get them to subscribe to my newsletter, right? I need to make them aware first. Then I need to try to get them to engage, right? And so if we're optimizing each phase, then we will essentially be creating a strong business. Now, if you're interested to learn more about digital marketers' customer value journey, they have tons of content on their website about the customer value journey. Just fantastic. I will include a link in the show notes with content about this so that you can get access to Digital Marketers' blog and the really good pieces that they have about this concept. All right, let's move on. So then we have the 7 critical elements of online marketing. And the first one, probably the most important, and the one that gets skipped so often, are the core goals of your business, of your campaign, of the push that you're doing. A lot of times this gets skipped, especially with small business owners and new marketing professionals. You have to define the goal first so that you know how you're going to measure it, and you can create assets or a strategy or use tactics that are actually going to help you get there. It's very different to say, I want 100,000 people to see me, right? To get to know me, versus I want 100,000 people to sign up for an event. Those will require drastically different approaches, right? And some additional elements. To see you, if you give me enough time and enough money, we can make that happen. To get 100,000 people to attend an event, I may need more money or more time in order to make that happen, right? And so those goals are not the same, and we can't look at them the same. We can't measure them the same. Then we have our contextual elements. And I talked about this a little bit in class, and so I'll share this with you. This is, to me, when we start talking about some of the branding stuff. And I would say the book talks about it as design navigation elements, but I would go so deep as to say it's the stuff your customers are going to interact with. Now, there's some important aspects here. We have to make sure that the contextual elements, the design and the navigation, do not hinder the message that we're communicating. If we say something is comfortable and we put up a picture of a bed of nails, we may be creating some dissonance. And like, I don't understand how this is comfortable. And then I see like pictures of glass and nails, right? And while the messaging and the customer, what we say might be perfectly targeted towards the customer, and we might be picking the right customer, we might have the right price point, the contextual elements may reduce the impact of the message because it doesn't make sense when people look at it. And so just keep that in mind when you're designing things. If you want something, if you're saying something's easy, then when you're designing your website or when you're building out your like images, they also need to look easy. Okay. There's some other things here with contextual elements, especially as time progresses, that I think is important to highlight. ADA, or American with Disabilities Act. It's important for us as marketers to understand that as time moves forward, we're in a place more and more where this is becoming an expectation that we are able to comply with ADA guidelines. Okay. And however you feel about it doesn't matter. There are organizations that are being sued because they don't have these compliances in place. So make sure that your website is easy to access, that it can be read really easy by screen readers, that it is colorblind friendly, all that good stuff. And there's a couple ways to do that. One way is to make the website minimal. Okay. because most screen readers, if you don't have a lot of text in a lot of different places and you don't have a lot of like picture graphics and stuff like that, most screen readers can read text. The other thing that you can do is add in a tool that helps you with compliance, right? So if you go to mauriceadavis.com, you will find that my website is black and white, minimal images. It's really close to being fully compliant without any additional plugins. And that's because it's minimal. Okay, so just some context for you. Then we have our content. This is the actual information that we share in order to aid in the education process. There's tons of information about how to create great content. Company that I would shout out for this is HubSpot. They have a inbound marketing course that I think is probably one of the best that I have interacted with. It was one of my first that I took online, and as of the last time I checked, was free. Then we move on to community. With the way the world is now, this is becoming more and more critical. Matter of fact, just today, I was on LinkedIn and I saw I saw a post that Patreon now added or is going full in on community. What that means is they've added like user profiles and more content so that the people that join your Patreon can now interact with one another on a much deeper level. And so when we start thinking about community, we have to understand that information is becoming more commoditized. The connection to people is not. Okay. Then we have the communication. So we need to be mindful of how we have mediums available for people to communicate or how we're communicating in different mediums. And so understanding that different people like to absorb information differently. That means we might need something in a text form. We might need a video. We might need audio only. We might need pictures, right? These are different ways that we can communicate the exact same message, but changing the medium that people can consume the information will change the people that you reach. Hey, Maurice here. Different Maurice than from the show that you're watching right now. If you want access to all the resources that I'm talking about and you don't want to have to write them down, in the notes below, you'll find a link. If you register there, I have included all the resources that I talk about inside of this free database. It's yours. So get back to the show. I hope you enjoy. Then we have our commerce, very similar to this communication piece, in that we need to be mindful that the way that I like to shop is different from the way my neighbor likes to shop, and having the ability for us to both self-select how we want to engage your business and purchase your products. And so some people like shopping on Amazon, others want to shop directly on your website. Some people want to come into the store, other people want to be able to purchase in an app.
Let's go shopping.
And so the more that we're able to diversify and allow people to self-select, the more likely that the customer's needs are going to be met. And then finally, we have our connection. So we want to make sure that this one can be a little confusing without some explanation. We want to make sure that we have a way for our customer to take the next action, that the process is seamlessly connected. So that's important here. All right. Let's take a look, understanding the social media drivers. I'm going to kind of speed through these as the show is starting to get a little bit long, but understand that this stuff, they're connected, right? So the information effect, most of social media is around sharing information, content, whatever have you. And so this ends up being one of the key pieces that starts the social media wheel. We are on social media most of the time because we want to be connected. We want to share things with one another. Okay. And so when we start talking about community and being on social media, a lot of this has to do with this idea of being connected or the connected effect. The network effect is really around like how I'm able to interact with something because a friend of mine has done it, right? If you're on Facebook and you've ever seen like, this friend likes this page or this friend commented on this page, those platforms are leveraging the networking effect to say, hey, if your friend likes this, you might like it too. Okay. And then we have the dynamic effect. This happens a lot when we're thinking about social media content, that back and forth communication. I comment, you respond, I respond to your comment, somebody else gets involved in our one-to-one conversation. And now we have this really dynamic conversation happening in the comments below a piece of information that I shared, that someone else shared, that is now pulling people in to have these real conversations and doing the back and forth interaction. And then we have time timeliness effect. And this is how fast you respond. This matters. Okay. And more so when we start talking about customer satisfaction, customer complaints specifically, and then like sales interactions. I need to find it, but there was a study done that like the speed in which the response happens for sales. And I will look for the study for it or some context about it so that you have that and you can review it. But it essentially said if you don't respond in 5 minutes, the likelihood of selling that like drastically goes down. There's also the interaction of like customers want you to respond faster on social media than oftentimes you're able to do. Anecdotally, because I don't remember where it came from, but it's like the book specifically talks about it, but I do know it came from somewhere else and I don't know where it came from. But it talks about people when they submit a complaint on social media really want you to respond in an hour. And even if you're responding relatively quickly, there are still folks that will want you to respond faster. And so we have to be mindful of this when we're talking about this social media effect and how quickly we can respond. All right. So, what are the various motivators for mobile applications? There are 7. And most of these are, inherent, like we understand them because we do them. The first one is me time. How do I use a mobile application in order to create space so that I can enjoy time with myself? We may say like games on mobile apps would be a really great way to like have some me time. The second one is socialize, communicating with other people, getting that social activity out of the way using a social media platform. Most social media platforms are built on this socializing component. That's why it says socialize. I go on apps because I want to buy something. I want to shop. We are seeing more of this as the apps progress. TikTok added their TikTok shop. Facebook did their Facebook shopping. We have platforms that are specifically around shopping. Shopify exists because people want to be able to shop. These are all aspects that are important to understand and to incorporate in what we're doing. We want to accomplish things. And so an accomplishment piece may be something like a fitness app, right? I want to lose weight. And so by tracking and measuring and doing all the other stuff, it's more likely that I'm going to accomplish my fitness goals. We can also use apps to prepare. In the past, I've used apps to prepare for like exams. I needed to make sure that I was exam ready. And so I used my app to do test prep. Right now, I'm learning French using Duolingo. Shout out to Duolingo. And that is a preparation, right? It may also be an accomplishment piece if we really want to get down to the nitty gritty, right? And then we can discover new things on apps. So I may be on an app because I like a topic, but I want to learn more about a topic. It makes me think about like masterclass. Okay. Masterclass may be an opportunity for you to discover something new. If you've never heard of Masterclass, go check them out. These mentions are just so everybody's clear. These are not like plugs for these organizations. These are just tools that I use to learn and grow.
Let the learning begin.
But they may be a way for you to discover new things. There have been several things that have popped up on Masterclass that had I not been on the app, I would have never really thought about, hey, let me learn about that. Okay. One example is there's a guy on there that does like a gardening class. And I would tell you right now, I'm not a gardener, but I've seen his masterclass pop up a couple times. And I'm like, man, maybe I should just spend a weekend and learn and apply some of the things that he's talking about so that I can grow my own space. Okay. And then finally, we can self express. So, one that I would say is a really great self expression are places like Medium. And Medium is like a blogging app where you can go on and you can write about whatever it is that you want to write about. YouTube may be considered self-expression. Podcast apps may be considered self-expression. Okay. And then let's talk about app pricing models. There are 3 models that apps kind of fall into. Ad supported. So you're on there and they're getting paid by having ads on their app. They can be freemium. So I offer you the base components of the app for free. But in order for you to get the really good stuff, you have to pay for it. And then you have paid. So this is like you just straight out paying. Now, it is important to understand that most paid apps also have a upgrade option. The paid is for you to be involved. It's not for, that's not it. There's definitely more. All right, let's move on to learning objective 5, and this is recognize and understand the components of digital marketing strategy. I'm not going to go too heavy with this because right here, this can be related to control from chapter 2. So I would go back and I would look at control because that's what a lot of this is, right? when we really look at it and like, okay, what's happening? I think of it like the processes that we're going through in the control phase. Some may look at it and say, well, no, not really. It goes a lot deeper than that. But even still, the entire like 5-step process in chapter 2 is this, right? So we can say this is control, or we can say it's the entire process. Okay. Either way, you can dive into this and get a much more in-depth breakdown of what they're really trying to get here if you go back to chapter 2 and review that section. So let's go ahead and move on. I did include kind of the digital marketing campaign steps, but again, these are marketing steps. They're not just digital marketing steps. And so this is the process, right? So you'll notice that this is basically the same process that we go over in chapter 2. Okay. And then lastly, but not least, understanding the vital factors of picking an influencer partner. The goal of influencer marketing is for you to be able to leverage someone else's influence to essentially allow them to sell you a part of their audience or to sell you the attention of their audience. And so when companies are doing this, they have to have a way of evaluating who the right partner is and then how much they should pay those partners. And so there are 4 ways that you can go about evaluating a partner. So number 1 is relevance. How closely connected are you and that partner? Okay. So if you're trying to learn marketing, which if you're watching this, that's what I think is happening, and I'm partnering with an organization that's about teaching marketing, that is high relevance, right? And so my audience that's trying to learn about marketing would be more valuable than somebody else's that maybe in like all things created equal, then maybe somebody else's audience that's all about grooming. Okay. We may share audiences, but the relevance and the likelihood that the audiences of those 2 creators wanting and needing the same things may be a little bit harder to draw that line, right? Reach. How many people do you have in your circle that you can potentially reach? This can be looked at as 2 ways. What is the size of your audience? So how many followers do you have? How many subscribers do you have? And then secondly, what is like the average reach that you get per piece of content created? And I say that it's important to understand 2 ways, because if you use one and not the other, then what you will find is you may find someone that has a really big audience, but when they post, they don't get a ton of engagement. Or you'll have somebody that has a small subscriber base, but when they post, they get a ton of engagement. And without looking at them both ways, you may undervalue or overvalue a creator. Then response, this is like, hey, yeah, I see you're getting a lot of reach, but how many people are actually engaging with it? And remember, that engagement is going back up to the 4 E's, right? Like respond and engage are very similar. And so we want to make sure that the creators that we're working with are able to get responses, because it probably means that their audience is more engaged than someone else that has little to no response. And then lastly, what is the return of the post or the content being created? So how many sales are you getting? Are they taking the actions that you want them to take? Right. So a return for this show might be how many people are listening that are actually going to grab the digital marketer vault. I could use that as a return mechanism and say, I get 100 listens per show, and of that 100, about 10 to 15% go ahead and grab the notes. Right. So that is my return rate. So I just want you to understand how to place these things. We don't have to get so literal, but I'm sharing that example so you can kind of go, okay, what does that look like if you're not actually selling something? Okay. All right, guys, that's what I got for you. I appreciate you listening. And I say guys, but I mean people, my humans. I appreciate you listening. That's all I got for you on this show. If you have not grabbed your notes yet, make sure you drop down below into the show notes, mauriceadavis.com/vault, so you can get access to these notes and all the previous notes from the different sections, including any resources that I have reviewed or evaluated or tossed into the show. This is where they all go. So as I start talking about books and stuff on the shows, I try to throw them into the vault because it's much easier to keep them in one collective place. So you're not trying to jump between shows to find the resources. So that's what I got for you. Stay out here, one of y'all.